Hi, Anne Merrill here. So today is Thanksgiving. I'm in America celebrating and visiting people, which is why I've been eating all this wonderful American food that makes me so inflamed. I'll recover afterwards. So I wanted to begin the online program by honoring ancestors. I think it's important to start that way. And for me, the biggest, most important herbal ancestor I have is Michael Moore. He's not a blood relative, but I do consider myself to be in his lineage as an herbalist. He was my teacher at herb school. I was in his last class actually in 2006, which I feel very fortunate for that, because not only did I get in just in the nick of time in his last class, but it was also the very end of his teaching. It was the culmination of his entire career as a teacher, and it's actually the same class that's available online for free on his website, which I will link to at the bottom of this video in the comments. So I'd like to talk about the way that I came to him as a teacher. I grew up, my mom's an obsessive gardener and still is, and so I grew up with plants, and I always wanted to know what they were. Always was curious about the wild plants and the weeds. My next question after what is that was always, can you use it as medicine? So for me, it's been just a lifelong calling, in the sense that I think of, there's calling, actually hearing a voice, but there's also, if something is just pulling at you with curiosity your whole life, that's calling. And I think the more you listen to your callings, the clearer they become. So I would look around and want to know what the wild plants around me were, and the plants growing around me in Austin, Texas weren't the plants that were in most of the herb books for the most part. And so I went into an herb shop and I asked them, is there a book that will tell me about the wild plants that grow here? And so they sold me Michael Moore's Medicinal Plants of the Desert and Canyon West. And I read it absolutely obsessively. And what was so cool to me about it is not only was it about these wild plants that grew in my area, but he was funny. He was really funny. And maybe it's because I'm partly of Irish American extraction, but I think humor is absolutely crucial to health, just a healthy worldview and living comfortably in the world. So I was really excited that he's really brilliant, intelligent, and innovative, and an incredible thinker, but he was also hilarious. So I found his books to be really enjoyable to read. And so I began reading his books and learning a little bit about him. And then at one point I was working office temp jobs, and so sometimes I would be sitting there all day with nothing to do but with an internet connection and getting paid to sit at a desk with an internet connection. And so I would research medicinal herbs. And at one point I was researching all the different systems, Ayurveda and Chinese medicine and Unani Tib, and because I wanted a system. I didn't want to just do this herb for that. I wanted to have a system. And that's when I came upon Michael Moore's system, which his website is incredibly generous. He died 7 years ago now, but his website is still up, and all his materials are up there for free. He died totally broke because he gave so much away. And so all the materials, except for the books, which he had contracts with publishers for, everything else is available for free on his website. So I started going through his website and learning about his system, and it really appealed to me because he uses regular Western physiology. And at one point I got a rune reading. I was at this, there was a festival at the herb shop where I used to go, and then I used to work there for a long time. I got a rune reading from this man, and instead of having those runic alphabet symbols, his runes, he had hand painted pictures of the things that the runes mean. So a picture of a boat, and a picture of an open door, and a picture of a closed door, and things like that. So and I asked him about it. He said he made it because this way, your brain doesn't have to translate, and that you can uh, access deeper levels of yourself more quickly if you're not having to always go through this translation process in order to do it. So he really liked using these pictures that people already had in their heads and could relate to and already have some kind of symbolic meaning for, rather than this basically foreign language that was lacking meaning for them. And I really like that idea. He actually became my therapist for a while because he was just great. Anyway, so that led me to this idea of, I really want to be working in my own language, in my own paradigm, in things that sort of feel truthy to me, rather than having to translate into a different language and a different system and then learn herbs through that. I wanted to feel really connected and direct with herbs. And so Michael Moore's system really excited me because he was working on using these same kind of concepts of looking at interconnected whole, looking at physiology as a system, but at the same time mapping exactly with the same standard physiology that is used in Western science. Really cool. So I read a lot about his system, got really interested in it, and then it took a while for me to make the transition to where I was going to be able to leave Austin for the time it would take to do his program in Arizona and save up the money and all that stuff. But that became my goal. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to change my life. And so I eventually went to his school, and I learned physiology from him. I learned herbs from him. What I wasn't anticipating that I got from him that was incredible was he taught us kind of how to think. He taught us critical thinking skills about how to learn about herbs. And so he gave us, on the very first day, he gave us this big CD set. There was a whole bunch of resources that I keep to this day on my hard drive because it's searchable. I can use keyword searches on my computer and I can get all this information up. But basically a library of books and just tons of information, and kind of opened my eyes to how, if I learn field botany and I could figure out what this plant is, then how to go about from that finding out how have people used it traditionally, what can I tell about how it might work herbally. He did a lot of experimentation. He did a lot of using other species in the same genus as a more commonly used plant and learning how they're different from each other and what similarities they had, of course. And and how to sort of interpret through ethnobotanical information, because sometimes the ethnobotanists aren't always the most skilled herbalists, and so how to kind of interpret through what they've said, and just sort of this meta level of how to be an herbalist that's beyond the information contained in what he said. And he would always say a good herbalist is a generalist, and he really encouraged us to stay big picture and to not get so detailed that you lose sight of the overall. And let's see, what more can I say about him? He was funny and warm, and I refer to his materials all the time. He had he did make an intake form that was a few pages. Again, you can look it up on his website, and it's very useful as a sort of training wheels of how to begin seeing clients and developing custom formulas for them. I don't use it anymore. He actually didn't use it. He created it as a sort of training wheels, as an exercise. Like, you go through this several times and you get the ideas of the kinds of questions that you ask in order to get the information. And I still use that same basic model more or less in thinking about how to choose herbs. So that's what I have to say about Michael. So I just want to take this moment to honor him, to express my gratitude to him for having made me an herbalist. Okay, happy Thanksgiving.